Let's go around the table so people can identify themselves. Paul, we'll start with you.
Paul Holman, Anchorage Assembly.
Mike?
I'm sorry, Mike Gutierrez Assembly.
Harriet Drummond, Assembly, West Anchorage.
Dick Trainee, Assembly.
Bernie Hall, Assembly.
Jennifer Johnston, Assembly.
Chris Birch, Assembly. Bill Starr, Assembly.
Lucinda Mahoney, CFO.
Dan Sullivan, Mayor.
Thank you. We've got enough for the work session. And
Debbie Osiander, Assembly.
thank you, Debbie. Appreciate it.
Miss Gray Jackson's on her way up, Mr. Chairman, but she can't find a place to park.
Okay, I thought it would be kind of busy today. Mr. Mayor, this is your proposed 2011 budget. I'll turn the time over to you. If some members can keep their questions until the end, that would probably make it easier.
Thank you, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
Appreciate that. And Debbie, I hope you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Cheryl emailed Debbie the presentation
Good.
that we're going to go over today. Well, thank you, everyone. We're pleased to present the 2011 budget. As you know, this is still a very challenging time for the municipal budget, and you'll see that reflected in the information that we provide today. What we wanted to do at the very start was just show you kind of the general trends in the overall economy, and we won't spend much time on this, but you can just see that, quite frankly, when you look at building permits, personal income, airport traffic, crude oil prices, those sort of measures, that it really is a fairly flat economy. And I think you'll see that our budget represents that sentiment of a flat economy. The budget presentation will also reflect, I think, very, very modest increases in taxes, but significant decreases in quite a bit of different areas of the budget. The next slide shows the market volatility. Again, we certainly have investments that help our budget. We take 4% from our trust fund, and if the market done significantly better, we might have made a recommendation to increase that back up to 5% going forward. But again, the way the market's performing, we know for sure that there's going to be liabilities for our police and fire retirement funds, and we know that our trust fund probably isn't going to be able to be increased in terms of its dividends to the city. So this is the gap chart. You've seen this many times, and what this does is essentially show that on a continuation budget, there is a significant gap between expenditures and revenues going forward year after year, and that's why this year, next year, the following year, you're still going to see necessary reductions in city spending in order to close that gap. You can see the revenue assumptions that we make here. We assume fairly flat property taxes. We're assuming state revenue sharing continues at $15 million a year. We're assuming that program revenues will kind of reflect the economy with modest increases of 1 to 3% annually. And then on the expense side of the ledger, we're projecting, of course, with the personnel increases, 3 to 4%. And you'll see in the chart coming up here that actually those numbers are probably fairly conservative. New debt, police and fire retirement contribution, we're contributing $8.6 million a year, down from $12 million last year, but at the same time, 2 years ago, we didn't have to contribute anything, so it's a new cost that is very challenging. And we're assuming inflation at 2 to 3%, and again, a modest assumption, if you will, and if inflation starts ratcheting up, that gap chart gets even more dramatic. And again, some of the folks that I've been talking to are basically predicting within 2 to 3 years you might see a spike in inflation because the government's printing money and increasing debt, and when that happens, you typically see an inflationary cycle. So, but for at least the next several years, this is probably a pretty good assumption. And this assumes at the very, very bottom no savings. So if we do nothing, we just let government growth continue, revenue expenditures, and you see the significant gap. Did you have a question?
Continue, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
We got questions, but I want to come back to them after you're done with your initial presentation. We have an hour and a half, and I assume we're going to take all the time.
Sure. The 6-year fiscal outlook is a little bit different than last year. Last year, and we've made some adjustments, but that's what you do in budgeting. You look at each year's scenario and you make your changes. The 6-year fiscal plan essentially assumes that there will be, again, very, very modest increase in property taxes. It assumes, again, the revenue sharing. It assumes new revenues of approximately $6 million a year, and I'm basing that on Chairman Trainee's proposal on the tobacco tax, which, again, we'll speak to it later, but the community dialogues did mention that they're interested in new revenues from users of commodities rather than assets like property taxes. Then on the expense side, again, similar assumptions on police and fire, labor increases, new debt, and the others. But the one thing that changes is at the very bottom. In order to close this gap, we do have to make reductions anywhere between $10 and $35 million annually in order to close the gap. So it's very challenging.
Let me interrupt you for a minute, Mayor. I just wanted the record to reflect that Elder Gray Jackson joined us at 12:05.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Continue, Mr. Mayor.
The continuation level budget, what this shows is if we did absolutely nothing for 2011, we started from 2010 with about a $421.5 million budget. Without any additional personnel, without any changes, that increases almost $29 million in 1 year. And so that's the gap, if you will, between last year's budget, the continuation budget. And it includes $16.5 million increase in salary and benefits, and it includes $14.6 million increase in debt service. And the reason the debt service number is so high, as you all remember, last year we refinanced debt, called refunding it, and this year we're not refunding the debt. And so you see a large driver of the increase is debt service that last year, again, we spread out over numerous years, and our CFO's analysis, it's best not to do that again this year and just to essentially take the hit. And what it really does is it puts the debt service level back up to what is actually a traditional number. So it's we had that one anomaly last year where we reduced it dramatically, but this actually brings it back up to kind of where it usually is year after year. The next slide shows, again, what your, as we talk about the main drivers of some of the gap. If you go to the far right-hand column, you can see what the wage and benefit increases are by bargaining group, anywhere from a low of 5% for the plumbers and pipe fitters, up to a 15% increase for the laborers, police at 9%, fire at 7%, IBW 8%. So you can see all those numbers, and again, it adds up to a significant amount of increase. And this is not dissimilar to what 2010 increases were. 12, 13, 14, you're going to see similar numbers. So this is really the big challenge, and where we're hoping to get some support. All right, the next slide. This one shows basically if we did tax to the cap, we would be collecting about $15.5 million in additional property tax. We've got about $7 million in other revenues coming in, and that combination still leaves us about $6 million short. So even if we tax to the cap, we're millions of dollars short in terms of funding a continuation budget. Taxing to the cap is about a 7% property tax increase, and quite frankly, we don't think the public is going to accept a 7% property tax increase. In our budget dialogues, plus the numerous presentations that I've made over the last month or so, I'm hearing just the opposite. People are willing to have a hold the line sort of increase, but 7% is unacceptable to the public. So as you see, it's really not a revenue problem so much. We do have a structural spending problem. We are literally structurally deficient in revenues versus expenditures, and that structural deficiency is something that causes this to be broken literally year after year after year. So there's not a one-year fix, there's not a one-time revenue source. You can get a grant 1 year, but unless that grant is guaranteed year after year, you're just literally pushing the problem out. So we do have a structural problem. So what we did, as you know, is we went out to the community and asked for greater input from the community this year. As we've mentioned before, in 2009 and preparing the 2010 budget, we really did not have the time to properly engage the public and find out what the sentiment was in terms of growth in both spending and services, where they wanted revenues to come from. And I think it was consistent throughout all the dialogues what we heard, and that was people don't want drastic cuts in services. They'd rather see the city become more efficient. And of course, when we talk about efficiencies, it sometimes means, as we saw in our public works reorganization, that there is loss of positions sometimes, but the goal is that you're actually doing better service with less cost, and that's how you do it. So once we've proven to the public that we are indeed a more efficient government, they said, fine, we might be willing to pay a little bit more, but we don't particularly want that to be property tax. So back to the thought about things that you use being taxed rather than assets that you own. So, and this was, certainly one aspect of our decision-making. We listen to the public, there are constituents, but we also internally, of course, listen to our department heads and we listen to assembly members, and, we get a lot of input from a lot of different sources in putting the budget together. So here's kind of the key number, probably everybody's been waiting for, is that between 2010 and 2011, you're going to see an increase of about $13.8 million in spending. Again, the large driver of this is the bond debt that we're not refunding this year. We're pretty much absorbing the costs of employee increases. I mean, those are the cuts that will be made. We'll make up for those increases. And then the large increase really is the bond debt. On the revenue side of things, you can see that we've got an increase of about 1.6% in property taxes. We'll get into that a little bit later, but about 1% of that are voter-approved items, and about 0.6, less than, about half of 1% is actually new property tax spending. So when the public told us to hold the line, we did, and the major increases for things that the public has approved through voter approval. So we do have an increase in other revenue sources other than property tax, in fact, of about $8.6 million. And I don't know if in this document we list, okay, we do. Okay, we'll get to those in a couple slides to show you what that's comprised of. And then you've got your IGCs and program revenues, which we won't get into too much detail today about. So again, about a 3.3% increase in new revenues, and again, the budget goes to about 435.2. So on the revenues, this just breaks out where the money comes from. Obviously, still the key driver, 55% is property tax, and then you can see what the other sources are. You don't need to spend time on those, but you can see where it goes. And then the other revenues we talked about, the 1.6% increase in property tax. You've got $3.8 million total. 2.3 million of that is voter-approved O&M and service area decisions. And overall, the property tax increase as proposed is at $36 a year on a $300,000 home. The non-property tax increases, and again, you can read them, but we're projecting that the room tax is doing better this year, so we might see almost $2 million in new bed tax and other smaller items. And then again, on the $6 million column, you can see the breakdown for those. One of them is we have $1 million coming from Build America bonds, which helps us pay for the cost of bonds, so it counts as a revenue source for us. And there are some departmental fees and fines being recommended. It'll come before the Assembly. It's kind of an omnibus bill. In many cases, areas where, again, cost user, cost payer, and particularly there's areas where things have not been increased for quite a few years, and inflation at some point you have to take into account. So what's the impact on taxpayers? Well, the maximum property taxes allowed, $236.8 million. Service area is about $15.8 million. So the maximum that can be collected is about $252,528,708. And our proposal is $11.5 million under the tax cap. So again, we heard the public out there. We're not going to a 7% increase. We're staying significantly under the cap. And you can see the numbers from last year as well. We're about $8 million under the cap last year. So the two-year total, you can see there. Where does the money go? And again, when you get your budget books, you'll see in much greater detail in each department. And we're not going to get down to that level today, but this kind of just gives you the big picture numbers. Your public safety areas are certainly the big drivers. Your public works and community development areas are the second largest, and then all the various areas. Just statistically, as you see on the next page, the overall budget pie, if you will, as it's divvied up, you've got police and fire about 40% of the budget, public works, community development about 32%, some of the quality of life items, parks, libraries, transit, 14%. Administration, everybody, I know in our budget dialogue said, cut administration, but it really is less than 10% of the entire budget. And as you've heard us, we're looking at initiatives in every department to be more administratively efficient. And then the Assembly and the Mayor, we don't even account for a blip on the screen. We're lost in the round. So
I think the terminology is interesting, lost in rounding.
Lost and rounded.
Interesting terminology.
So if anybody suggests that, gee, those assembly guys in that mayor's office should be trimming millions, it's just not there, so. But again, the magnitude of the expenditure increases really mean that every department has to participate because you have to balance a budget with so many millions in deficit. You could completely wipe out a department if you wanted to. You could wipe out your library system or your transit system, but that's really not the best way to look at budgeting, I don't think. And so it's a balanced approach. Every department does have to share in the challenging choices. All right, everybody always usually wants to know what does this mean in terms of personnel, and this is down from last year. We have 110 positions deleted due to the budget reductions. 56 of these are currently vacant positions. 54 of these are filled positions, but not all 54 will be losing their jobs. In fact, there's only 31 actual layoffs in this particular budget. The others are actually being moved to grants or to capital project charges, so they don't appear in your operating budget when they're charged to grants or they're charged to capital projects. So 31, I think, is the number. Is that correct, Joe? Yeah. Then what we wanted to do this year was something really different in terms of what you've seen for the last 6 years or so, and that is far more detail in the budget documents about what it means in each department down to a much finer level, so that the transparency is unquestionable in terms of what this really means in each department. So it's detailed department and division expenditure information, and you'll see also in each of our departments our performance measure standards that we've asked each department, as you know, to present to us what their goals are, how they're going to achieve those goals, how they measure the success. And so that gives us the data to know whether a department's being effective with the money you're giving them or not. And we do, as it says there, we update throughout the year on uni.org. So the next couple of pages will show what the difference is going to be in some of the information you receive. And Cheryl, I'm going to let you kind of walk us through the new details.
Sure. Okay, the page 19 is a page from last year's 2010 budget at the division level. Okay, we haven't changed the level of information at the department-wide level, but on page 19 is the detail. That's all the detail you got about a divisions level budget. And the yellow handout that you have also that accompanies the PowerPoint, this will give you an idea of what the changes are. So if you look at this, on page 1 is very similar to the department summary information you received previously. Okay. On page 2, the reconciliation that takes you from FY10 to the changes in FY11, that is similar to what you've seen in recent years. Then we've integrated on page, the next page, the performance value results frameworks and measures for the performance measures and the data into the department and division budget. So in this case, for the fire department, these are their department level summary of their PBR. So you can see where with the measures you can determine how well they're doing their job. And then the next page, this is where we get into the additional information that's provided to you. I tried to put it in the PowerPoint, but it scripted it all down. So that's the handout. But you can see where it's 10-7 here. At the summary level, we provide you salary and benefit information that's similar to what you've had. Then we put down revenues for that specific division. And then we give you details regarding the kinds of positions that are in that division. So it's not just the number and the number of full-time, part-time, but it tells you the kinds of positions. So you get a sense of how they deliver their services. And then the next page is further detail about that division summary. So it breaks down salary and benefit information. So on page 10-8, it talks about, it tells you how much is for straight time labor, how much for overtime, how much for leave, benefits, et cetera, and vacancy factors broken down at the division level. And then down further, you also see additional program-generated revenue information, so you get a sense of do they generate, what kinds of revenues do they bring in. So again, this level of information has not been in the budget book, at least for a number of years. And so it continues again for each division. So that's just a flavor of the additional information that we're making available to you as well as citizens. And then, shall I keep going on the
Sure.
PBR? And so again, we have a sample of what was in the fire department's performance value results presentation. On page 22, it's again the measures and the data by which you can determine how well they're achieving their goals. So in this case, they're reporting their emergency call dispatch time for cardiac arrest calls. And so you can read across a number of seconds how they've been doing over the years. And then on page 2, the turnout time for cardiac arrest calls, and again, the data. And then the third one is response time to cardiac arrest calls. And so the point here is to help give you additional information about the dollars that you're appropriating, what are the results being delivered. And so our hope is that it might change some of the discussion you have with the departments, so it's not just all about the numbers, that instead it's the results they're delivering for the dollars that you're choosing to invest in those services. So that's integrated. The data will be updated throughout the year. We have a website that it's going to continue to get some improvements, but it is providing to you as well as citizens the information about the services and the results that are being delivered. And then also on the next, okay, in terms of the budget books, we have those for you to provide. We've got the PBR frameworks, the 6-year fiscal plan. That also has been integrated into the budget. It will follow the overview that's in the budget book itself.
Cheryl, is that budget book by department?
Yes.
Can you give me it by account? Back in '93, we used to have it broken down by account. It was about 10-inch thick document.
Well, we're up to about 4 inches. Let us talk about what kind of
If you would,
report
I'd
you
like
like
to
and
see
we'd be
the
glad.
old format.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I
we
can
can't
break
do
it down by
service-
account.
Are you thinking of service levels?
Yes.
We can't do service levels.
Okay, well,
The
we'll
budget-
talk about it.
Well, the budget system that was purchased several years ago does not have service level information. We will hopefully in one of our future ERP projects that Lucinda's heading up with Dave Ryan, we're going to talk with you as one of the users of the information too. What is it that you want to see? So we can end up with a budget system that can provide more meaningful information.
Thank you.
So,
Continue, please.
I share your pain.
I like the old system because I
I
can
know.
tell exactly.
Yeah.
We all sort of previously, up to a certain point had the service level budget, and
Yeah.
it was a real nice snapshot of that division detail, employee by employee actually, so it was very handy.
And finally, we do have a citizen's guide to the budget that we've developed, and we hope that it might be helpful for some of you with your community councils. It's just general background information. It's really the overview from the budget book as well as a backgrounder about the budget process and then some additional appendices that are in the budget book. So that's something that's, again, also up on the website, so.
Very good. And that concludes the budget numbers portion, and then of course the next steps are, you can see on the very last page, numerous work sessions, 3 public hearings, and probably a several-month process where we'll get into much more detail about in our work sessions as we bring forth department heads to talk about their budgets, and you can see more individually what it means for each department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to go around to all the semi-members, so I'll go to each one of you individually. Debbie, since you're on the line, do you have any questions, ma'am?
No, but I'd like to have that department rate in my,
You'd like to what?
if I could have all the handouts left in my packet.
Cheryl,
I'll
I'll
make
get it
it
to you. Cheryl Praskill, send it to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now go to all the semi-members for all your questions. I want to make sure everybody gets to ask the questions they want. Bill?
The positions that are being eliminated, the 33, or I think you said 39, do we have an expanded breakdown that we can perhaps see initially confidentially and then later on so we can talk about it, brass tacks with the department heads? The next step slide is important to me in particular as chair of budget and finance. which will also be in conjunction with the BAC, will be doing departmental level reviews with department heads. And so I'd like that information to be empowered so that when they start talking about positions, we're sort of briefed on what they do, and then ultimately it becomes a game of figuring it out. But the seriousness of it for me is those are real people and real names.
Sure.
So-
Well, in your budget book will be the AO that's to be introduced October 12th. Plus, there's what we call the support to the AM.
Sure.
And it's a regular sized piece of paper like this, but there's a column for vacant and filled positions. So you can go down, see which reduction and the associated impact on a position. So that information is in your book.
Okay, well, to me, it's not necessarily the level of detail that they're working on at the department head level. And, you know, the sensitivity of people losing their jobs is challenging, but it has to be discussed. So, you know, I just saw a 3/4 page ad with Officer Rivera in it, and I think that was his name. And that's, you know, when it comes right down to real people, if that's the decision that the department heads are making, I'd like to have that conversation with them.
Well, in that case, it's associated with a collective bargaining agreement, which requires seniority. So,
No question. Well, not only department heads, but, you know, Adam Trombley here is PAC. We've talked about other user groups, union groups, all the others. You know, our forums are going to be hopefully detailed and flesh it out. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Chris?
Well, I just wanted to thank the mayor and staff for a great presentation. I think this is a good way to kick it off and gives a good high-level view and the perspective. And obviously, the focus on property taxes is much appreciated, and the nominal impact on the property owners in our community. One question I did have is I very much appreciated the metrics on the progress towards goal in the case for the cardiac arrest calls and the response time. Are we going to anticipate seeing those type of metrics or those benchmarks, or you know, how we're doing my department, or is it just unique to the? So we'll have that for basically
All the departments were required to participate in the performance value results exercise, and it will be maintained and continued for all departments. Some are a little harder to measure than others, and so there's certain ones where there really is very well-defined data, and those are easier to illustrate sometimes, but no, every department participates.
Well, as a numbers person, it is very helpful to actually see where you've got measurable objectives, and you can see where there's an increase or an improvement in a department. So.
yeah, and we also would welcome hearing from you if there's some aspect of a department's work that you think there should be a measure of how effective it is being delivered. You know, your suggestions about what would be meaningful information to you as decision makers in allocating the budget. So we would welcome that feedback, and I'm sure the departments would too, right?
Of course they would.
All I have for questions at this
Thank you,
time.
Chris. I'll come back around to people. We're going to have lots of. Jennifer?
I have one broad question and then a couple of small detailed questions. The broad, it definitely feels that you've taken a little different approach in this year's 6-year fiscal plan from last year's. And I can, you know, first of all, we're not going to be refunding. Secondly, when last year's 6-year fiscal outlook, we were addressing and much more of a Herculean type cutting, where we were going to take our poison pills for the first 2 or 3 years, and then we would be in a sustainable situation. Now, it seems that you have made the choice to take the poison pill over a 5-year period and not be as drastic. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
I think that's probably correct. There was, I think in the original plan, it was a $20 million cut last year, $25 million cut this year. And just as we got down into working with the departments, you know, the delivery of service became very challenging with a $25 million overall cut. But that doesn't mean that we don't ask for your help in this as well, because this is just our initial presentation, and if over the course of the next several months you see additional suggestions that you'd like to put forth on further cuts, you know, we'll work with you.
And then, and if you could remind me, for a percent increase in property taxes, what's the revenue from that?
For this coming, for the
Yeah.
proposed budget?
Right.
Yeah, it's a $3 million $3.8 million increase or 1.6%.
Percent, but I mean, so if we did it up to the 3%, because last year's, the fiscal plan had us taking a $25 million hit and tax increase of 3%. So
Right.
we're leaving a couple things on the table.
We are, yeah. We didn't feel it was appropriate to tax higher than what we are. In fact, it's relatively flat in terms of new. The 0.6 is kind of the new spending, if you will, less than almost half a percent. And the other is voter-approved items that
Right.
the voters said they wanted to pay for. So yeah, I mean, we're not at the same level we were last year. We're not going to tax as much, and we're not going to cut as much. But again, the final cuts are still kind of up to Bobby.
And then I guess on the dividing up the budget pie, and you have administrative operations at 9%, municipal manager 5%. What's the difference between administrative operations and the municipal manager?
It was too large, and I didn't want the 9% to go up to 14.
It's all good, Cheryl.
And part of it was because the manager's office now houses the ACBB contract, the museum contract, multi-million-dollar contracts, which count as his 5%. So it's not really administrative operations of the municipality that are part of the manager's office, but these external contracts that are quite substantial. And so it really kind of distorts an administrative category. So
Okay,
that's why- yeah,
I
thank you.
just wanted clarification.
Yeah, and if you look at the list on page 15, it shows you up in that far left-hand corner in small print, just what comprises administrative. On the pie chart. Are you looking at the same?
Page 15.
You have full size, we have it half
Page eight.
size.
It's the top half of page 8.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got full
Yeah.
size.
I
Sorry
get
about that.
confused in my numbers.
Yeah. So you can see all the different administrative.
And then my last sort of detailed question, and I realize that we are just beginning this process, but since you used the fire department as your example, and you show some cuts in the fire department, one being a unit up in Chris and my territory. If you make these cuts in South Anchorage and in Eagle River, will that stop any rolling closures?
Yeah, we've already stopped the rolling closures. We did when we came into office in 2009, and we haven't been doing rolling closures since. And that was one of the options that the department had put in front of us, is they could reinstate rolling closures, or just look at the equipment that is far and away the least utilized and take that decision. So that's the way we went. Now, keep in mind with the fire department, we didn't get into too much detail, but they're applying for a SAFER grant, it's called, and if they're successful in achieving this grant, basically the fire department reductions will be paid for by the grant.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, doesn't SAFER occur in June or July, I'm told?
Well, it's
The grant, so
you
you
can
wouldn't
get
have
it.
it coming in till then.
You can get it anywhere between January and September. So we're hoping January.
Okay. I understand we're also going for a police grant, and that did come in, but only for 3 or 4 officers?
Yeah, we've received a federal cops grant, I think for 4 officers.
Okay. Ernie?
No, thank you for the presentation. I love the format, easy to follow. A couple of questions I have already been asked.
Nothing? Okay. Harriet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Ms. Kraska. I'm somewhat concerned about the graphics in this chart, in this document. These graphics that have the revenues and the gap are missing the zero line. The zero line would be way down off the page on this page 4. I believe it's your slide number 4. The same goes here with your slide number 5, the 6-year fiscal outlook. Here, this one I could do on this page because it extends below the page. The zero line would be down here above my finger if you include the whole thing. And that's really deceptive not to have a zero line. If the public is just looking at a graph like that and the chart actually begins down there somewhere on the floor, and you have exactly the same issue with the response time for cardiac arrest calls. Slide
Yeah,
24,
fair enough.
page 12.
I think the key, is when we talk about this, we always talk about the numbers that are represented by it. I mean, if you look at the fiscal gap line below the chart, those are the numbers that are the reality of it. But point taken, I mean, we could certainly, use a much longer piece of paper and go down. When you're compressing between 400 million and 520 on one sheet of paper, if you went to the zero line, you literally would need another sheet of paper.
I understand, but I'm real concerned that the fire department is being misrepresented on slide 24 as doubling its response time for cardiac arrest calls, if you look at that graph. And that's not the case at all.
Ms. Drummond, that's a very good point, and the fire department prepared those, so we'll give them that feedback.
Thank you.
Sylvie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to start out with thanking the administration for providing much more information. I really like this a lot, and I really appreciate it. And with Mr. Traney, and Cheryl, you and I have been talking about service levels and how very much I would like to see them conducted. It was very, very useful. And if through the ERP process that can happen, I would be pleased. I have a few questions, and the first question is, I know that we went through performance measures some years ago in the Works administration, and I know that it was, quite frankly, hell for a lot of departments, including the assembly when I was providing them. Did the process go a little bit more smoothly this time around? I'm just really, really curious, because it seems like it has.
Well, first, you might get different answers depending on which department you ask. And the challenge is that some departments already collect a lot of data. The fire department, the police department, because of the nature of their reporting that they do to other organizations. For others, it is a challenge to think about how do I communicate the effectiveness of what we do. And so it's a work in progress and a continual improvement process.
Right.
So we'll continue doing that. We're gonna, so we've got a lot to do, but it was our first commitment to the start. So, yeah.
Was the assembly department able to participate this time around?
Well, I mean, the welcome to.
It was pretty rough last time.
Yeah, I view you as a different branch of government and sort of it's up.
So does the charter, thank you.
Okay, then my next question.
In terms of the budget, you guys, you know what you want to do and how to do it. And you don't need to hear from me about it. So,
Thank you. Okay, my next question. There is, because of what happened last year with bond debt, putting off, okay, what's the dollar amount this year?
The increase compared to last year?
No, what, the budget increased because of bond debt, because we're not gonna refund, okay? What's that dollar amount specifically?
It's 14 million.
Thank you. Okay, I think I have one more question for now. And that question is, I heard you say that there are 31 actual layoffs. Out of those layoffs, how many are public safety? And I'd like you to be specific, please.
I don't have that hand, I'd have to, well, we don't.
Okay, well then I'll start.
We'll follow up with you.
But I'd like an answer right now, actually. How many are police officers? How many are firemen?
Do we want to talk about the detail? Okay, what we're doing in the police department is I believe it's 12 junior officers that would be laid off. They would be backfilled.
By who, ma'am?
Pardon?
By who?
By detectives and patrol officers, a combination of
Not to
that.
get in your way, Elby, but I got a specific question on that.
Mr. Chair.
I want to know which detectives in particular. I'm concerned about if we're going to take detectives out of sex crimes against kids, I want to know about it. If we're going to take detectives out of sexual assault and put them back writing traffic tickets, I want to know specific numbers. Go ahead, Elby, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Mr.
Well, let
Chairman.
me answer your question. The PERF report recommended that, recognizing the challenging times we're in, that if you had to make adjustments, that you would do it at the detective level where they felt the detective divisions, and not getting into specific units of the detective divisions, had workloads that were less than comparable departments. And so those detective layoffs essentially would backfill the patrol officer, so there'd be no net loss of patrol. And then I think they also recommended you could take some folks out of the traffic unit as well and put them into patrol. So that's where the goal would be to maintain that frontline personnel out on patrol and not lose efficiency, because they felt the detective division could pick up the slack because their workload is less than other departments.
Okay, how about the fire department?
Fire department, the 2 equipment closures essentially eliminate 24 total positions, of which currently 16 are vacant. Okay,
Okay,
and then the SAFER grant would then backfill those positions, and it's just a matter of timing on getting the grant.
okay, so there's 16 vacant and the SAFER grant, if we get it, is gonna fill the other positions. Okay, and my last question is, how about the health department? How many positions?
Not very many. The positions that were reduced there, 4 of them are going to be charged to a grant. We were able to get an increase in the public health nursing program from the state of Alaska, and so those 4 positions will be paid for from that increase in the grant.
Okay, so
I
are
think
there
there's
any
a couple
net
of others.
positions
I
being
think
laid
there's a
off?
couple of others, but again, don't have my book with me.
Yeah, in your budget book, you'll see
Yeah.
all the breakdown.
Right,
by
and I know that I will,
Yeah.
but I wanted to ask these questions for these specific departments
Sure.
right now. And
Okay.
thank you for answering the
Yeah.
questions. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
And before I move on to you, Mike, just a question for the administration. I would really like you to have a work session on this perf report, since it is the basis of how you're putting together the police department assets.
Sure.
I want to report to the assembly, since we paid for it, on this perf report. And I'm interested particularly in page 154, where you make the assessments on moving detectives out of there, because
Yeah.
I'm concerned. I don't want to, because we're the highest sexual assault part of the United States. I don't want to take detectives out of that, Mayor. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We got a long process ahead of us, and I'm going to have a lot of questions, but just for expediency, just a couple today. First, I actually appreciate the information presented in here and the way some of it is presented, particularly the kind of the whole budget pie chart, showing that police and fire account for 40% of the total budget, because it's very tempting for people to say, well, we're going to cut, we're not going to cut police and fire. Well, that's just not realistic. If you're going to make appreciable cuts, you're going to cut cops, you're going to cut firefighters. What I would like to see in the weeks ahead through this process is some sort of an analysis from the administration on, for example, with the fire department. When you make cuts in the fire department and you close down apparatus, that has an impact in particular on my homeowner's insurance. So, for example, last year when we were just about a little more than $8 million under the cap, that saved me about $7.50 a month, which over the course of a year was a tank and a half of gas, which is not insignificant, which, added to my quality of life. Coming in a little more than $11 million under the cap going to save me probably a little more than $8 a month. But if because of it my homeowner's insurance goes up, it's going to go up by a lot more than that per month. So you're not saving me anything, you're actually going to cost me a lot, and I'm getting reduced services for it. I'd like to see some analysis from the administration on what that impact is going to be with respect to the fire department. I'd also like to see, we made a conscious choice last year to come in that $8 million under the cap, which exacerbated any revenue shortfall for this year by an equal amount. We're coming in $11 million under the cap this year, which is going to exacerbate any shortfall next year and force more layoffs, more reductions in services, more reduction in personnel. I'd like to see an analysis of what I know it's hard to tell because a lot of our revenue is a moving target, but I'd like to see some analysis of what that's going to look like next year as well for the 2012 budget. Because we're coming in under the cap in 2012, we're going to have to reduce X number more police, more firefighters, more people from the health department, transit, yada, yada, yada. So, sure, I know we have a lot of time and we're going to have a lot more questions, but those are things I think would be helpful.
Anything else, Mike?
No, thank you, sir.
Paul?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Cheryl, for the presentation. It's my first time at the rodeo, so to speak, on the budget process from this side. I know I was on the side with the executive branch and the police particular, helping to put together a budget that we could present in one of these very venues. And so a lot of my questions were already asked, and thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson, about the public safety questions. Those are definitely on my mind. One of the things that I'd like to ask is I went to all three budget dialogue, the Viewpoint Budget Building, and stayed the entire time at all three of the public ones, not the one, I missed the one that was an invited only, I guess it was a different one as it went through. And one thing that strikes me on your presentation here, it's on page 8, which was the slide number, looks like 15, is the proposed spending, the pie. The pie looks different than the one in the dialogues. And I'm sorry I don't have that with me, but that strikes me as a little bit concerning because I know that when you're seeking the public's input, and you're right, Mr. Mayor, they did say they went after, well, I think if I'm just speaking off of what I can remember, that we said that I think there was about 30 or almost 40% of the people said we can cut administrative and some more executive positions, manager positions, and in fact that pie kind of indicated that that was one of the greater parts of the budget. And yet I see now that we're down to 9%. I think the mayor actually highlighted it's really only 9%. Well, it looks a little different than what we told the public and what the public kind of gave input and comments on. And so I'm a little concerned about the pie itself. Although I think this one is fairly accurate. I have no objections to the numbers. I think these numbers here are fairly accurate. So I listened to what the community said, and realistically, I think you kind of summarized it on one of your slides here. I'll see if I can find it, but they did say they didn't want to cut services, and what I'm seeing, without looking into each and every department line by line, which I fully intend to do, I'm seeing positions cut at what I consider the service deliverable sections of the municipality. I haven't seen where an admin position or a support position or an exec position's been cut. Although I do know and recognize that under the reorg, there was at least one, perhaps even two positions that were cut. But I also saw, and that's
You'll
why
see in your detail that there's numerous administrative and executive type positions being eliminated.
But I do remember that during the reorg, there were at least two range 18 non-reps that were implemented that weren't there before, and increases on two exec positions. And so I'm going to have a bitter pill to swallow when I go to my constituents and the people that have given me input, saying, look, we're going to raise your taxes again, and we're going to reduce your service deliverables. And I got a real problem with that. I obviously don't mind paying my fair share personally, and I hear what that's coming from the community. And in fact, I think it was a little differently stated than what the slide says. And again, I'm trying to find the slide itself, but what I remember my takeaway was more than 60% of the people that commented, and I believe the report said it, is people don't mind paying for the services that they get, and they don't mind paying to the cap. They don't mind paying to the cap, but at the same time, they're demanding that we continue to seek efficiencies, to cut out reductions or duplication of services and waste, and that we continue to engage and seek other alternative revenue sources. And yes, you're right, Mr. Mayor, I believe it did say, please tax the stuff we do, don't tax the stuff we own. And that's the preference. The problem is, and Mr. Mayor, I think you're right, you said it in one of the slides, you have a structural spending problem. And the structure with property taxes being, and I think the pie said it, 55% of the actual revenue comes from property taxes, slightly better than half. What's the magic number? Do we reduce that by 5% by looking at other revenue sources or something like that? I mean, we need to seek property tax relief, but at the same time seeking to cover the service deliverables. You're going to be taxing people more, they're going to be paying more, they're getting a little less. I don't think we can say it any other way, and I look forward to the challenge of trying to make sure that the budget's met and that we come in as per the charter by the end of the year with a balanced budget that we can all live with. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Mayor, appreciate it. We're going to now go through assembly members that have
Can I
further
just
discussion.
clarify,
Cheryl?
Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
On the slide 15 on the pie chart,
Yes.
it's a different, it's by department.
Right.
And the one that was used for the community dialogues was sorted based on the functions.
Correct.
So it was a different kind. And so their administration, if you're in the Health and Human Services Department in an administrative capacity, that was included in the administrative slice of the pie. If you're in the police department in an administrative capacity. And so it was some rearranging of functions, and that's why it looks different. In terms of the reorg, there was, in terms of executive positions, my understanding is there was a -3 + 2. All right, so they were down one executive position as a result of the reorg.
But the two that stay get increased positions from
Well,
previously.
I thought your question was just about the number of positions.
No, not just that. I said the number is one thing, but
Okay.
it's another thing to say, we're gonna lay off a deliverable service guy, and then we're gonna give an exec that stays behind an increase in pay for their classification, and we're gonna create 2 managerial positions that weren't there before at a fairly high rate salary as well. I think the range 18 is what I saw. So my concern is that we're adding to management and execs, and increasing their pay, and at the same time, we're cutting out a person who gets the job done. And I'm not saying that the exec or the management doesn't do a job or serve a function, but if you listen to the public's saying, cut down the administrative, cut down the executive, and keep our service deliverables. That's what I heard loud and clear, and I have a little problem adding it up.
Thank you, Paul.
I think,
Appreciate it.
I think if you
Mr. Mayor?
take the time to talk to Mr. Jones, you'll find out that that's actually not the case. I think your analysis is incorrect, with all due respect. The people that are moving into those positions are going to be delivering service. They're going to be assuming responsibilities that weren't in those positions before. They're going to be service delivery people. And again, the net loss is where that organization not only loses an executive, it loses the head of the department. Greg essentially organized himself out of a position. And it not only saves money, but we think it'll improve service delivery. And that was the whole goal of the reorganization. So I think it's you can toy with what somebody's description is, but the bottom line is that department is going to function better at less cost, and that's our goal.
I'm hopeful that's the net gain, Mr. Mayor, but I still say that we have, the math is not quite there yet.
Right, but we also have
What's the time
performance
between
measures.
now and the budget
Yes,
hammer
we do.
coming down?
But we also have performance measures that will give you that information, as opposed to counting the beans.
Bill, before I come to you, a couple questions from administration. Fire department, are we gonna lose any medics? Because I know we bond for, I think, medic 7, and voters said we will pay O&M costs on that. Is that medic 7 gonna be fully operational?
Yes.
Now, Bill, before I go to you, on chart 13, page 13, I forget what chart it is, it gives us a listing of the work sessions. You're the budget chairman, you're gonna be conducting the work session. I'll do it when it gets to the assembly meeting, but for all the budget sections, you're the chairman of it, sir.
Right, and all of our committee level meetings, which are not on the schedule, are open to the public as well, and those are much more informal. And I generally let everybody speak, and we have an agenda that's in my head, as Elvie reminds me, and so it does tend to flex, but we're between now and October 22nd, the Budget and Finance Committee meetings will be meeting, and I'll try to broadcast out when those are and where they are, but we get rooms big enough, and we have an informal meeting place atmosphere. So.
Turn time over to you, Bill, you got questions?
Well, Debbie, you have any interest to speak on questions?
Not yet, I'll wait until I'm there. It's too hard to do over the phone.
Gotcha. I want to pontificate a little bit because I think that there's the level of detail that we need to get into the weeds, but the structural spending, that you reference is predicated a lot by our labor contracts and our labor rules. And, there's a whole host of ideas that come to me that are off limits to suggest, because I keep hearing that the work rules and the labor contracts are that. We've got an officer in the police department that made $114,000 in overtime wage alone. We've got the seniority that's got the work rules upside down, and our junior officers may be less costly to us in both the fire and police, and we can't move them into areas of that. We made the conscious decision when we approved the labor contracts for the fire department to put 4 personnel on each rig as opposed to 3. We don't let the volunteers read books in the libraries. We have IVEW groups now are changing the light bulbs in our traffic department. Is any of this stuff coming back to the table? Where are we at with the labor negotiations and the opportunity to talk about it?
Well, we're not in negotiation,
Have you asked? I mean, I'm just saying, how do
Let
we
me
ask?
answer the question.
Okay.
We wanted to present the budget first, so they all had it in their hand. You could see the impact department by department, bargaining group by bargaining group.
Right.
We're going to start scheduling one-on-one meetings with each bargaining group going forward now that they have the data in hand,
Right.
so that we can talk about your very well-made points that when you see, for example, on slide number 7, at least in my book, the percent increases, which are so out of line with what's going on in the private sector, that we're going to ask them to help us. We're in this together, and I'm hoping that they will, rather than running media campaigns will sit down with us and work cooperatively. But we can't bust open a contract unless both sides agree to do it.
Okay, well, I put out the 3 to 4 firemen that came about as a result of the contract. How do you quantify our services better because we have 4 versus 3 riding around? I'm not a firefighter myself, obviously. I don't know how to get that answer. We'll have the department level discussions, but if that work rule is off the table for discussions, then we do have this structural dilemma that's going to carry into the next couple of years. And with labor pushing 85 to 89% of our cost of government, I'm very frustrated. So I'd like to know, are you going to do it through a formal reopening request? Are we talking about the other bargaining discussions that are at levels of what you call them, or is it going to be send them a letter and ask them to sit down, or are we going to, how are we going to do that, or what are you going to do, I guess?
But it's going to start with the more informal discussions about what we see the challenges being, and then if it evolves into something more formal.
And if I can expand, just because it means that one of the roles that we play as this body is to provide bargaining guidelines to the mayor's group of negotiation teams. And so if you need to have clarity in what this assembly needs to do, guide us that you would want us to revisit the resolution that puts out the bargaining guidelines, and we will, or I will move forward to have that dialogue and debate, very specific or general. You could perhaps have a dialogue either with the chair or with me directly, and we'll move bargaining guidelines if you get that far, because I think that's real important, that you know where we're coming from as we represent our people. I'm happy to have the detail, but my first blush is I'm going to go into this frustrated still. We have, well, it's just an upside down model. We've reduced 250 to 300 positions, and the cost of government's still going up.
We're as frustrated as you are, sir.
Thank you. Sorry for that, but
No,
appreciate the answer.
We share the concern.
Thank you, Mr. Birch.
I guess I'm going to reserve my questions so I have an opportunity to review the budget book and the details. Where is that in the?
They're in the kitchen.
They're in the kitchen. Okay. So
Are they being-
we leave it.
Yours is in the microwave.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the overview, and I think we've got a good work session and public hearing process.
Okay, then.
So anyway, yeah, I'll reserve my additional questions so I have an opportunity to dive into the specific details of the budget book. Thank you.
We have about 30 minutes, so please don't take all the time up, but it's good to go through and get these questions out. Jennifer?
Thank you, I think I took my time up the first time.
Ernie? Anything? Harriet?
I'm glad Ms. Ray Jackson asked about what 31 actual layoffs are going to consist of, but I just did the numbers, and 20 of those 31 layoffs, or 65% of the layoffs, are occurring in 35% of the budget in police and fire. And I'm real concerned that those two departments are taking the lion's share of the layoff hits.
And keep in mind that those are the two departments where it looks like, grant monies are going to probably save positions. So we're pretty confident about the safer grant, it's just a matter of when we receive it for the fire department.
I'd like to see some specific numbers on which of those layoffs are going to be averted by grants,
Yeah, it's
and
in
how
your-
long the grants can continue. Because once you get a grant, there's no
The grant
promises that it
description's in there, it's as far as how many years and how much it costs. It's in your book.
Elvie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What percentage of the budget is labor?
I think it's 57%.
57% is labor?
My memory, that's always.
Yeah.
57% is labor.
No, don't go by my memory.
Personnel.
Okay. I'm writing down.
Show in your memory.
No, I'm writing down 50%, don't
No,
go by
that's
my
right.
memory, Cheryl, right?
55? Okay, 55.
55% of our budget is labor? So 55% of our budget is labor. That's interesting. Thank you. I appreciate hearing that. And then my next,
Sorry,
no,
Ellie,
Mr.
go
Chairman,
ahead.
one more question, please.
I thought you were done, sorry.
No, I'm not done. Just one more question. And will the citizens guide be distributed to community councils? Because I'm trying to figure out if I gotta carry a box around all month.
It'll be on our website, and so community councils can access it that way.
Through the website?
Right. Or if we can give some to the community center, and they can distribute, we'll work with them.
Right, that would be really great if you could, so that, because folks are gonna want copies, and I don't wanna carry a bunch of stuff around, if I don't have to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, man.
I'm trying to go paperless in this world, you know, so.
I agree with you, but there are still people who want our copies.
I would, actually, wasn't gonna speak on that, but I would agree. I think this administration's done a very good job of trying to drag the city kicking and screaming into the latter half of the 20th century. Eventually, we'll get to the 21st, but you've made good strides there, and I appreciate it. Since Mr. Starr pontificated for a moment, that's a great word, I'm going to as well, just by way of advice, and talked about negotiating with our bargaining units. And Mr. Mayor, you used a phrase or hope that they wouldn't launch a media campaign and rather sit down and talk. But you yourself have spent a good deal of your time in the media blaming municipal employees for everything from our budget shortfall to the crummy weather we had this summer.
I've never blamed the municipal employee. I have blamed the contracts.
And I would say
I like our employees.
that if our bargaining units are less.
Gentlemen, I'm going to end this meeting in a minute. One specific
Just
question.
don't misrepresent what I said.
I'm just trying to say that if our bargaining units are less than enthusiastic about coming back to the table, there might be a reason why. I hope that they will, but that's what you give in the world. So just
Well, in
leave it at
response, Mr. Chairman, generally when I'm asked, I will respond truthfully about what is increasing the cost of government. And I've never blamed a municipal employee, sir. I take exception to that. I have blamed the contracts that were passed in 2008. Those aren't the employees. I like our employees. We passed contracts in 2008, a previous administration and some members of this body that we can't afford. That has nothing to do with our good employees.
Moving on, Paul?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to go there, but I just have to say I agree with Mr. Gutierrez. I think I see it differently, Mr. Mayor, so I respectfully.
You're registered on that.
And you made a comment earlier on, Mr. Mayor, about this broken structure and particularly not accepting or trying to fund positions with grants that downstream will end up having to absorb it or becomes part of the cycle problem. And I guess that's, I heard you say it twice now. You have the SAFER grant, which has some structure, and then there's this police grant for 4 positions.
Yeah.
And so, I guess, am I to take that you're kind of also buying into the same part of the structure? I mean, you're going to accept grants that'll fill positions that otherwise would have to be cut. And these downstream will have to absorb it somewhere, some other administration, some other assembly that'll have to absorb, because I guess what I'm saying is that we get the cards we're dealt with, and just to liken the fact that, at the national level, we've got a president who tends to go back, looking back to how he was given a set of cards that he had to play. And I say play, and I say we have to deal with and make tough decisions. And I respect the fact that it's a tough decision to make, Mr. Mayor. I may disagree with you on your fiscal outlook, but, and how we get there is going to be a building process. And I'm looking forward to that, I really am.
Well, I appreciate that. Mr. Holman, if you would like to, I guess, advise us as a body not to accept the grants and take the harder landing now, we'll certainly listen to your suggestion.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I asked the question, is it meaning we're going to accept positions that we downstream will have to absorb within the municipal general government budget to fund these positions? Is that what it means?
In some cases, probably, but the other thing that we're hoping for too is downstream that the revenue outlook improves. I mean, we've got, like we showed at the start, fairly flat projected growth, the market's volatile. A couple of years from now, who knows, it might be a much better scenario out there, and you can avoid having to make such draconian measures. But again, if the body feels that pushing it, kicking the can down the road a little bit is something you don't want to do, we'll listen to your sage advice.
Thanks.
Before I end this meeting, just a couple of quick questions, Mayor. You're not saying we should tax to the cap, but if we decide to, are you going to support that, or are you going to require veto override?
Well, let's have our process
time.
first, sir. We got to hear from the public, and we've got 3 public hearings, we've got work sessions. Let's hold off discussion of things like that till we're down the road.
Just want to know. The other thing would be, meeting goes to 1:30, I know, but we're going to end it because we don't have any more questions. On the tax cap issue that we got put forward to offset property taxes, is administration's position they're in favor of doing that because it will offset property tax? Or is administration going to be opposed to that ordinance coming forward? I know we've not held a public hearing on it yet, I just want to know the mayor's perspective on it.
Again, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, premature for us. It hasn't passed yet. We haven't heard from the public. Let's let the process work itself.
Okay.
And then, I think, as a body, you guys will probably have vigorous debate over how to, if it's between 5 and 6 million in new revenues, I think there'll probably be some discussion amongst you on whether to use it some, all for property tax relief, all, portion, new spending. That'll be your discussion.
Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on your question, I thought the administration said during the presentation that in an out year, part of the budget revenue source was the $5 to $6 million from the tobacco tax ordinance. Yeah, so it's already in the plan.
No, I mean, again.
Well, I thought I heard you say that.
Yes, we're putting forth scenarios.
Yeah.
And scenarios
say
change.
that.
If it doesn't pass, then that gets amended. So,
Right, but
yeah.
I'm just surprised that that's even a scenario, considering your comments just now, but
Well, I mean, a scenario is just that. It's a guess. It's a projection. And it's easily amended if the body goes a direction different than what, my assumption is. So.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for everybody being here. Appreciate your attendance. This meeting is over with. Thank you.